wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Nurlemi and my registration number A1M2199066. And today I will explain the material for psycholinguistics and just go. Okay, sequential psycholinguistics and study of the sequential or transitional structure of language behavior provides meeting ground for linguists, information theories, and learning theories. The linguist, applying his own methods of analysis, discovers hierarchies of more and more inclusive units. The information theories usually starting with lower level units such as letters or words find evidence for rather regular social translation certain in message sequence. The point of height certain often corresponding to unit boundaries as linguistically determine the learned theories working with notions like the habits family hierarchies find possible to make a prediction about sequential psycholinguistic phenomena that can be tested with information theory techniques. Transitional probability linguistic structure and system of habits family hierarchies. And transitional structural analysis assumes units of given order, phonemes, morphemes, words, and seeks to ascertain their transitional probability. Given an occurrence of the units, see what is the probability that Y will be the next unit to follow, that C will be etc. for first order probability, or given the sequence of units Cy, what is the probability that C will be the next, that W will be etc. for second order probability. Similarly, for higher order probability or stated in information theory terms. In the case of the occurrence of sequence Cy, what is the amount of information in the occurrence? So of Y given the previous occurrence of C first order. In the case of the occurrence of the sequence CYW, what is the amount of information in the occurrence of W given the previous occurrence of CY. Second order, the units with which this type of analysis might operate are various. The most readily available units are letters of conventional orthography. This choice might be purposeful as when the investigator in corner with the statistical prepared telegraph message, e.g. Shannon, or it's my preference. Some linguistic innovate, e.g. Neumann's Small Bible, where interest is in speech behavior. The units chosen should be phonemes rather than orthographic symbols. Morphemes are also possible units for this type of analysis, as are words. Statistical first analytic structure. Statistical analysis ignores the different hierarchical values of these boundaries. All boundaries for purpose of statistical procedure are taken as equivalent. Thus, in the sentence just preceding this one, the boundary between R and taken, that between taken and us and the between us and equivalent are not accorded the different status which linguistic analysis will ascribe to them. They are lumped two together as cases of the same sort of thing. The difference between them, which are entirely ignored to, however, get reflected in a certain fashion in the statistical results. This difference transition will often be found to have different probability of occurrence. The difference transitional probability are in a way indexical of the different linguistic status of the boundaries between the words of each pair. The corresponding is only raw, however, and many other factors besides the linguistic hierarchical status of the boundaries affect the transitional probability. Statistical structure then is to be understood as denoting the system of transitional probability relationship between the units of a given order in language. Care shall be taken not to confuse the terms order and level. Words, morpheme, and phonemes are different orders of units between units of the same orders through along habits, family, hierarchies, and transitional probability. In other words, a habit, family, hierarchy is a cluster of association in which one of the members is or is common, such the linguistic structure of the language, and the semantic structure of the culture is such that certain message even occur more often than others. The other frequency of CR and certain message even appear close together in the temporal sequence than other conjugate of CR. It must follow that at each level organized herds of habits of verbing traits will be developed, and these will correspond to sets of transitional probability. Assuming a constant and limited number of alternative events of a given order, phonemes, morphemes, and then contractions, etc. Transition characterized by convergent hierarchies should correspond to points of relatively low transitional entropy or uncertainty, e.g. where a wide variety of stem morpheme converge upon a limited number of suffix, and transitions characterized by divergent hierarchies should correspond to points of relatively high transitional entropy or certain e.g. until phonemes of first following chapters, as we pointed out above. It seems necessary to view language behavior as organized simultaneously on the level, a semantic receptional level, a grammatical integrational level, and a receptive expressive sensory-motor skill level. Each of these levels is assumed to deal with units of transcription size, hierarchical rank such. The units at higher level include units of the next lower level. Finally, mention should be made of the conditioning or resulting effect or context upon selection within hearing and hence upon transitional probability. Given only knowledge of the immediately attendant even at any one of these level, uncertainty as to the second event is maximal within limits imposed by the structure of the hierarchy, as we ensure our knowledge by taking into account more and more of the sequence of antecedent events as well as subsequent events. In the case of decoding certain as to the subsequent event decreases. Psychology, this is due to stimulus patterning, e.g., the stimulus including starches from past events becomes more specific and hence more spatially associated with given response than with the others. Okay, thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nursafitri Siraif. My official number is A1M2 19058. I will continue the material that my friend has brought before. I will bring material about habit family hierarchies and transitional probabilities. Whenever a variety of stimuli terminate in a common response, we have a convergent family hierarchy. Whenever a given stimulus is associated with a variety of responses, we have a divergent family hierarchy. In other words, a habit family hierarchy is a cluster of associations in which one of the members, S or R, is common. Since the linguistic structure of the language and the semantic structure of the culture is such that certain message events co-occur more often than others, frequency of SR and certain message events appear closer together in the temporal sequence than others, contiguity of SR, it must follow that at each level of organizations, hierarchies of habits of varying strength will be developed, and this will correspond to sets of transitional probabilities. Assuming a constant and limited number of alternative events of a given order, phonemes, morphemes, words, constructions, and etc., transitions characterized by convergent hierarchies should correspond to points of relatively low transitional entropy or uncertainty. Example, where a wide variety of stem morphemes converge upon a limited number of suffixes, and transitions characterized by divergent hierarchies should correspond to points of relatively high transitional entropy or uncertainty. Example, initial phonemes of words following junctures. Beyond these general determinants, the habit strength of associations within hierarchies will vary with frequency and contiguity factors, and so therefore will vary the entropy characteristics of sequential sets of message events. If frequency and contiguity factors are such that all of the alternatives following a given event are of about equal habit strength, uncertainty will be maximal for that number of alternatives. If frequency and contiguity factors are such that one event is highly associated with another and other events only remotely, a relatively low degree of uncertainty will exist. A number of observations of behavioral stereotypy, including the masses of highly regular data about languages assembled by Zift lead one to the hypothesis that habit family hierarchies tend toward a structure such that habit strength of the member associations decrease according to a logarithmic function of their rank in strength. As was pointed out before, it seems necessary to view language behavior as organized simultaneously on at least three levels: a semantic representational level, a grammatical interrogational level, and a receptive expressive sensory-motor skill level. Each of these levels is assumed to deal with units of decreasing size, hierarchically arranged such that the units at a higher level include units of the next lower level. Finally, mention should be made of the conditioning or restriction effect of context upon selection within hierarchies and hence upon transitional probabilities. Given only knowledge of the immediately antecedent event at any one of these levels, uncertainty as to the subsequent event is maximal, within limits imposed by the structure of the hierarchy. As we increase our knowledge by taking into account more and more of the sequence of antecedent events, as well as subsequent events in the case of decoding, uncertainty as to the subsequent event decreases. Psychologically, this is due to stimulus patterning. Example, the stimulus, including traces from past events, becomes more specific and hence more precisely associated with a given response than with the others. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you for your kind attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rasya Nurul Zahrah. My registration number is A1M219060 and I'm from class B. So today I'm going to explain about the certain characteristics of phonemes. A few applications of entropy measures have already been made on the level of phonemic analysis. The probabilities of English phonemes and all of possible sequences of two such phonemes have been estimated from a text of 20,000 phonemes, and appropriate entropy measures have been computed. Similar analysis will probably be carried out in the near future on other languages. Such studies will be of great value in describing and comparing the structures of various languages. But however, since the factors governing the choice of phonemes extend over long sequences of phonemes and even morphemes, these entropy measures can at best be regarded as average over a large set of conditions and so only partial descriptions. Jacobson and his co-workers go at this descriptive problem in a different fashions. Here, the phoneme is treated as a class of sounds defined by a set of distinctive features. This sort of analysis permits one to estimate the degree to which all of the potential combinations of distinctive features are used. Whereas the descriptive language has usually limited his interest to those combinations which can occur in a language, it appears that analysis of relative frequencies of combinations may reveal data which can be more meaningfully interpreted and lead to more fruitful hypotheses. One such hypothesis is based on the assumption that a message will tend to be more produced in such a way as to take into consideration the effort of both the speaker and the hearer. For example, in any cluster of consonant phonemes, the minimum effort for the encoder would be the one in which any two successive phonemes would be the most similar disc. This, however, would cause a maximum effort on the part of the listener, who would be forced to make a new series of very fine distinctions. For the decoder, the simple situation is one in which two succeeding phonemes differ as much as possible, thus making the distinction easy to make. If speech does reflect both factors, then we would expect low frequencies of both extremely similar clusters and extremely different clusters. For example, a normal distribution curve where frequency of a cluster is a function of the difference between the two phonemes in a cluster. Roman-Jakobson distinct feature analysis over a meaningful measures of differences between phonemes. If we compare the English phonemes P and T and E, we can establish that T and E have the same distinct features, except for their contrast as two continuum are interrupted. This contrast is here counted as being difference of two units. On the other hand, while T and P contrast as two grave or acute, which is two units of differences. They also differ in that the feature of strident or mellow is irrelevant in P but is in T. This kind of a difference is here counted as one unit of difference, so that P and T differ by a total of 3 units. In this way, the units of difference between any given phonemes and all other phonemes may be established. The series of 20,000 phonemes analyzed by Carroll, showing the frequency with which each phoneme is followed by every other phonemes. Provide data for a test of our hypothesis. We would predict the lowest frequencies of clustering would be between phonemes maximally similar or maximally different. The result for 845 consonant clusters are as follows. The above is merely one particular analysis. The investigations of factors which might determine transitional frequencies, however, can be extended to cover all types of data. A further examination of the same material used above indicates other possible fields for investigations. For example, a significantly higher percentage of voiceless stops is found to occur before juncture than the corresponding voice stop. The fact that this is due to a well-known historical change in Germanic is of no relevance here. Precisely, the same phonological factor which might tend to cause this on the synchronic level would also operate in affecting change. Exactly what this factor is, of course, is difficult to determine. One possible explanation is the seemingly reasonable assumption that less information needs to be given in final position of word units. This would then assume that voiceless gives less information than the corresponding voiced. It has been suggested by Zips that the voiceless is easier than the corresponding voice, so that if the information value is not a factor, the system might tend to choose the unit requiring the least effort. This is, of course, merely a hypothesis which would have to be tested in various languages.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Suci Kartini, Standbook A1M2-19060H. I want to explain about application of entropy measures to problems of sequential structure. Okay, let me start. The most obvious way to approach this more complex aspect would be to apply entropy measures to extended sequences of phonemes taken from a large sample of text. By increasing the length R of the sequences of phonemes in A, the class of all possible sequences of attendant phonemes, we should be able to find a minimum sequence length, say n, for which Hs cases to decrease significantly, S being the class of subsequent even. The set of joint and conditional probabilities obtained for all sequences of length n or less should enable us to set up a macro process which completely represents linguistic structure within the limit of sampling error. While such a procedure is feasible in theory, it is hardly practical because of the enormous effort needed to sample and tabulate the very large number of sequences in A. Moreover, the result of such an analysis would be of such a bewildering complexity that they would be practically unusable. Okay, number 1. Higher order Markov processes. A more practical conceptual scheme can be devised using the concept of a higher order Markov process, a Markov process such that each of its states it is itself a Markov process. Such a scheme can allow incorporation of the exciting units of linguistic analysis. For example, the states of a higher order Markov process could be morpheme classes, each of which is represented by a Markov process whose states are phonemes. Such a representation has additional advantage in clarifying the entropy analysis of phonemes. It is easily demonstrated that the probability of a morpheme may be expressed as a sum over all the morpheme classes of the probability of a morpheme class times the probability of the phoneme in that morpheme class. In other words, the probability of a phoneme is a weighted average of its probability within each of the morpheme classes. Thus, a highly probable phoneme could be highly probable in just a few morpheme classes or moderately probable in nearly all morpheme classes. In English, the phoneme A is highly probable only in words including a definite article morpheme. For example, the, des, those, while the high probability of the vowel phonemes is most likely due to their moderate probability in a large number of morpheme classes. A simple count of phonemes over a large sample of text would be incapable of indicating these phonemena, whereas the analysis suggested above should. Thus, the more complex analysis proposed here is potentially more capable of indicating the detail of linguistic structure. Okay, number 2, entropy analysis of a small-scale artificial language. The analysis of small-scale artificial language given here is meant as a demonstration of a potentially valuable technique. The demonstration hinges on the fact that given the rules of its construction and the number of its interchangeable states, the total number of messages that can be transmitted is now infinite. This is, of course, not true of natural languages. However, artificial languages can be so designed as to incorporate any particular aspect of language in which the investigator is interested without contamination with the many complexities of natural languages. Moreover, such languages permit the study of phenomena which may not be found in any natural language. While it is correct the point out that we can only get out what we put in such an artificial language, this technique allows us to explore the implication of certain aspects of linguistic structure which we may not have been aware of previously. I think enough for me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Samsinar, group number A1M219064. Now I will continue material from my friends Suci Kartini. Application of entropy measure to problem of sequential structure. Entropy profiles the analysis of the amount of entropy reduction for every unit, and the modeling used above seems to be closely related to the entropy profile analysis to be described here. However, there are two important differences which should be noted. The first, an entropy reduction analysis presupposes that the number of possible mistakes is finite and that the probabilities of each of the mistakes is known. An entropy profile analysis involves no assumption concerning the number of possible mistakes of their probabilities, but requires only that the first component unit which can occur in the environment of the mistake and their probabilities be known. Thus, it appears that entropy reduction analysis could be applied only the limited classes of natural lineage mistakes, since the number of mistakes in nearly all lineages is indefinitely large. And next, an entropy reduction analysis of the type above presupposes that the structural units of the lineage are known. Such an analysis indicates the contribution of the unit. The entropy reduction and entropy profile analysis involves no such assumption about the higher order units of a lineage, but serves in the selection of the most appropriate higher order units. Okay, the next, the closed procedure. While not strictly an application of entropy measurements, a new method of measuring convertibility of relatively large scale text being developed by Wilson Taylor is certainly relevant here and could be translated into information theory static. The underlying logic of the method is as follows. In the process of encoding transitional differentiation among semantic events, among grammatical and syntactical regularities, and also ultra-class inverted her within skill sequence are simultaneously contributing to our rather free choice selection among heresies of alternative of each choice point. If the encoder production a mistake and the decoder receiving it happen to have highly similar semantic and grammatical habit system, the decoder ought to be able to predict or anticipate what the encoder will produce at its moment with considerable accuracy. In other words, with both members of the communication as shared common association and common constructive tendencies that should be able to anticipate each other verbalization. Taylor has demonstrated the feasibility of this technique as an index of readability. In fact, it behaves more satisfactorily than either the Flash or Dell call formulas. Not only does it order the sum materials used as demonstration by the authors of the standard formula in the same way, but on some special test materials, it alone yields sensible results. For example, Buttflash and dull call indicate a phasic from the triad stain as being very easy. Taylor close to stain more averted as very difficult. In other words, this method takes into account the highly unpredictable semantic and grammatical sequence characteristic of STEM. Taylor has also tested the assumption that this method is essentially a measure of degree of conversation in a very careful design experiment using Air Force training materials, for which conversation texts were already available. He showed that close score correlated very highly with initial conversation score or pre-message and also predicate terminal conversation or post-message. And there are many possible applications of this technique to psycholinguistic for problem. For example, it is possible to construct alternative coded message of the same topic and use the clause method to determine which from furthers the most information transfer. See section 7.3 for discussion of an entropy measure of information transfer which could be combined with the Taylor procedure. And the significant advantage of Taylor's clause procedure is that it types simultaneously all of the complex determined affecting word choice, but various levels of organization and truth along street of scansion. It is evidence of conferring and condones example readability, message, conferenciability, and decoders example individual difference in reading skill, second language mastery, information about topic, and etc. Okay, thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rizal and my registration number is A1M219062. In this video, I will be talking about transitional organization association techniques. In any empirical analysis of verbal behavior as it occurs naturally in a conversation, an interview, letter, a book, on oration, or what have you, the investigator is likely to feel overwhelmed with problems of multiple causation affecting the production of utterance. In an effort to simplify the analysis, one might, following Skinner, divide the causes into four major groups. 1. State of the speaker. Here one might study such variables as driver or needs, attitudes, beliefs, fatigue, etc. And 2. Audience variables. The language or sublanguage spoken of understood by the audience. The stimuli from the audience indicating approval or disapproval. The ease with which the audience can hear the speaker, etc. are important consideration within this category. And 3 is verbal and nonverbal referential stimuli. Under this heading, one might investigate the effects of presence or absence of things being talked about, past experience in the presence of given stimuli, discriminative reinforcement histories, etc. And 4 is intraverbal connection. In this category, one might study the tendencies of a speaker response to influence his future response. The tendency of the choice of one word to lead to the choice of a related word later. The choice of one form of utterance to lead to the choice of a particular subsequent one, etc. Since we are concerned here with transitional organization of language behavior, the fourth category is the one of which we may turn our attention. The general assumption being made here is the emission of any antecedent response increases the probability of occurrence of a hierarchy of interrelated subsequent response. It is also assumed, of course, that this intraverbal connection arises in the same manner in which any skill sequence arises, through repetition, contiguity, differential reinforcement. It should be recognized that this analysis does not lead immediately to a tool for breaking down contextual effects. Any utterance, especially a single word, may be thought of as belonging to a large number of response hierarchies, sound class, form classes, sequence class, frequency class, etc. The analysis thus suggests, however, experimental techniques for dealing with fragments of context in simply situation in which their specific influence may be more precisely studied. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Teguh Sulistiyo Tandjung, Stambuk A1 M2 19070. Today I'm going to explain about channel capacity in semantic decoding. In Shannon development and information, channel capacity is defined as the maximum rate expressed in bit per second at which a communication channel can transmit a message with a minimal amount of an error. When the rate at which messages are presented to a channel in the rate of input except its capacity, the amount of a random error in transmission increase with the amount of extensive information. Comparable phenomena seem in ordinary language communication when a radio announcer spins through a series of baseball scores: Yankees 2, Browns 4, Red Sox 12, Senator 5, Indians 3, Tiger, Fox, and so on. What is a simple text for the encoder may be an impossible text for the decoder, who wants to know who played whom and with what result. If the decoder does hold onto a particular game and its result, he loses both what went before and what followed in this case. The channel capacity of the decoder has been passed. Experimentally is necessary to deal with the human communicator as a single system, interviewing between manipulatable states of physical input system and recordable state of some physical output system as intervening between observable and response. However, communicating unit is composed of many subsystems whose limit or capacities may vary one from the other. One experiment's problem is immediately apparent in order to study the character of any system in a communication chain. It is necessary to devise conditions under which the capacities of the other system are not limiting factor. Theoretical analysis for present purpose we shall eliminate by our choice of stimulus material and response categories. Grammatical aspect of decoding. As shown behind me, the semantic system is here conflicts at the state of mediating process, which is, as in plaque reaction, are dependent to variable degrees upon states of the input system. We shall assume that as any system, mechanic or organic, the semantic system is limited in the number of different states, which is its assumed during any infinite time, its rate of shifting from the state of its infinite. The capacity of the system under optimal condition will be called its maximum capacity. What are some of the conditions affecting functional capacity? The greater the conditional dependence of states in the given system upon states in the ascendant system, the greater its functional capacity. Conditional dependency in this context is assumed to be equivalent to the habit strength. Since latency of reaction is an inverse function of habit strength, the strongest of the decoding habits, the more rapidly each mediating reaction will follow presentation of the aborigine sign. One of the baseball faithful for whom the sign Athletic and the Red Sox are strongly associated with differential mediators will have less difficulty keeping up with the announcer stream of the score than and casually followed the sports referring back those between member of the set ascent and member of the set run. In ordinary language communication, of course, these conditional dependence are very high heard of since words as physically stimuli are strongly associated with particular significance and not with the others. The question of the effect of the transitional dependence with a given system, for example, the tendency for certain states of the system to follow order with non-chance probabilities, raise a number of complicated problems. Transitional dependence or redundancy is assumed to be equivalent to associations when dealing with sequence in the semantic system. Predictability of the subsequent member of the set of given knowledge of the occurrence of attendance member of this set certainly on a practical level. It seems obvious that the rate of the decoding will be faster when the sequence required of the semantic system is one for which is already set on the basis of the past experience. The Lord Prayer is presumably easier to decode than a series of baseball scores. In studying the case of learning verbal material choice with varying approximation to English syntactical structure, so far we have assumed that the number of units in messages as determined objectively from the input or output necessarily correspondent to the number of the state assumed by the semantic system in any sequence. For example, a Rolling Stone gathers no mouse contains 6 units because there are 6 words separated by white space. But let us suppose for the sake of argument that in English rolling is always followed by stone, and stone is always present by rolling. For example, maximum transitional dependence or redundancy one rolling stone represent of the state of the two sequential states in the semantic system. The habit strength for the response are nearly equal to additional alternatives have the effect of increasing response randomness or entropy. However, if conditional dependencies are generally high so that given the state of antecedent system reliably led to the particular states of the subsequent system, then one habit strength is so much larger than the other that additional alternative can have little effect on response entropy. The general nature of the result of the expert is so diagrammatically in figure behind me. Up to a certain critical rate of input, rank A, total time will be a decreasing function of increasing rate of presentation and encoding. Encoding time is constant through this range because it depends solely upon the decoding of the last signal plus the constant encoding time prior signal are completely decoded before the next appears. Total time decrease through this range because of this rate presentation is becoming faster for a certain range beyond this critical point. Range B, total time will be remain at some constant value while encoding time gradually increase. Encoding time increase because it now includes increasing time spent in decoding prior signal. The object is still decoding round when red appears, and it's still decoding red when tall appears. Starting the measurement of encoding time, total time remains constant through this range because of the increase in the encoding time is compressed by the more rapid rate of input. At some further point, total time should become variable, and this should be accompanied by appearance of frequent error. Rank C at the first critical point that at which total time becomes constant and encoding time begins to increase, the difference between total time and encoding time should provide a measure of decoding time. Under this particular condition, that amount on the time request for decoding input signal, the projection of the critical point of the baseline shown by a dashed arrow in figure behind me, should indicate channel capacity under this condition. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.